The bleach still burned his hands when they laughed at him. Martin kept scrubbing the marble floors of the 47th floor conference room, his mop soaking up the last traces of the executives' catered lunch roast beef medallions, untouched wine glasses, and laughter that dripped like condescension. "Careful, old man," one of them snorted, not even bothering to hide his smirk. You missed a crumb of relevance. They didn't know. They never asked. They didn't know that Martin once owned a thriving logistics startup, that the man now reviewing quarterly losses used to be his co-founder. That betrayal had stolen everything: his money, his name, his future. They only saw the uniform. But Martin had been watching, listening, studying. Each night after his shift in a one-bedroom apartment filled with dusty binders and used textbooks, he mapped out a plan. It had taken him years. Now, as the company neared collapse, his chance had finally arrived. He wouldn't shout. He wouldn't warn them. He'd simply walk into that boardroom one final time, not to clean it, but to take it back. The night shift always began the same way. Keys jangling, lights flickering back to life after everyone else had gone, and Martin sweeping. He wore the uniform like armor navy coveralls, worn gloves, and a faded ID tag that read Facility Services. His back was slightly hunched, not from age, but from habit, from carrying the weight of being overlooked. Every evening, as the last of the finance guys slammed back their coffees and vanished into elevators, Martin would roll his mop bucket toward the boardroom on the 47th floor. And listen, not eavesdropping exactly, just present. It was hard not to be when voices spilled out after hours full of careless power. Executives clinked glasses and traded half-truths under the low hum of fluorescent lights. They joked about market failures and layoffs like they were playing poker. Martin remembered when he used to speak in that tone. Before the lawsuit. Before Gregory Mason. Gregory, now vice president of strategy at Echelon Corp., had once been his best friend and co-founder. They built a company together in their 20s, until Gregory stabbed him in the back. "I just can't go down with a ship you refuse to steer," Gregory had said, handing Martin forged papers he'd already filed with the board. By the time Martin realized what had happened, his name had been erased, his accounts frozen, his wife gone. He didn't fight back right away. He couldn't. For months he drifted. Then one night alone in a rented room that smelled like mildew and regret, he made a decision. He would learn the system that destroyed him, and he would wait. Martin picked up janitorial work just to stay close to the world he once knew. He studied finance during his breaks, watched online lectures, filled notebooks with observations and numbers scrawled from earnings calls. No one paid attention to the janitor, and that was his gift. On Tuesday nights, while scrubbing the executive break room, Martin would overhear CFO Paul Lansing venting about cash flow instability. On Thursdays, he'd pause outside the strategy room long enough to hear murmurs about debt consolidation plans that reeked of desperation. The company was bleeding, but no one was watching closely enough to notice. Except him. He made quiet investments under a proxy name Lighthouse Holdings, micro stakes at first, then larger ones through joint accounts and shell firms registered overseas. It was slow, but Martin was patient. He lived small, saved everything, worked nights and studied by day. His only real indulgence was a wristwatch he'd kept from the old life. It no longer ticked, but he wore it anyway. A reminder. One night during a routine sweep of the 45th floor, he crossed paths with Lonnie. She was wiping down the vending machines, her sleeves rolled up past her elbows. Late 20s, sharp-eyed, smarter than she let on. "Ever notice how they never refill the Diet Coke?" she asked, not looking up. Martin gave a faint smile. "They only stock what they think the board drinks." Lonnie raised a brow. "So, no one here's diabetic?" That made him laugh. First time in weeks. They started talking during breaks, just small things. Shared silence, observations. Until one day she caught sight of the spreadsheet Martin was sketching in his logbook. "You don't seriously study this stuff while sweeping floors?" He nodded. "Every night." She stared at him like he'd just confessed to time travel. "You're not just a janitor, are you?" Martin shrugged. "I'm just someone who's not done yet." It was Lonnie who introduced him to Roy, a former warehouse supervisor now cleaning bathrooms on the 41st floor. And then Gina, an older woman who used to run payroll before a round of layoffs replaced her with automation. Martin began to realize he wasn't alone. There were others like him pushed aside, discarded, and all of them were invisible to the men upstairs. He invited them to lunch one Sunday. They met in a park with sandwiches and iced tea. Martin brought diagrams. "What if we bought in?" he asked, unfolding a sheet of paper. "Bought what?" Roy asked. "The company," Martin said softly. They laughed at first. Then they saw he wasn't joking. "I've been buying shares," Martin said, quietly, "for years." He pointed to the chart. "This place is going to default on their debt in 18 months. When that happens, someone will buy it cheap. Why not us?" Later that week, Martin returned to the break room as usual. The executives filed past him like he was air. Gregory Mason was among them, slim suit, crisp haircut, the same wolf smile he used to wear in their college dorm. As he passed, he dropped a balled-up napkin on the floor right in front of Martin. Martin picked it up. Gregory smirked. "Thanks, Marty," then walked on. Martin didn't say a word, but his jaw clenched, and in his mind the plan clicked forward one more turn. Ooh. That night, after the last light in the tower flicked off, Martin rolled out the blueprint again. Debt, liquidity, key votes, names of shareholders he'd identified. He wrote one more line in his notebook. "Sweep the floors, then take the building." Rain lashed against the tower windows that Friday night. Martin pushed his cart along the 47th floor like always, bucket wheels squeaking on the tile. Inside the boardroom, the executives were mid-toast. They had just inked a predatory acquisition deal, one that would gut a smaller supplier and boost quarterly numbers for shareholders. Martin heard it all. He stood outside with his mop handle clutched tight, waiting for them to clear out. When the laughter died down and the last leather shoes vanished into the elevator, he entered. The table still held scattered documents, a half-eaten charcuterie plate, and a forgotten pen with the firm's logo forward together. Martin picked up the pen. He pocketed it. Ooh. The next week brought layoffs. 60 warehouse workers were cut with no notice. Martin heard about it from Roy before the news even hit internal memos. "They're calling it optimization," Roy muttered, punching a vending machine that gave him root beer instead of cola. "But they're bleeding people to look stable on paper." Martin nodded slowly. Then it's time. He'd waited long enough. He sat Laney, Roy, and Gina down in the building's loading dock, surrounded by stacked pallets and the smell of metal and mildew. He laid out folders with charts, call reports, and company debt models. Lonnie flipped through them, eyes widening. "Jesus, this is all from listening and reading," Martin said, "and watching patterns. I know who owns what, and I know when they'll want out." Gina leaned forward, frowning. "And how exactly do janitors buy a corporation?" Martin looked up. "We already have." In the last year, he'd quietly purchased nearly 12% of voting shares under different trust names. Then, with the help of a small investor network of displaced employees and laid-off vendors, he funneled enough capital into forming Lighthouse Holdings, a shell group designed to step in when the firm defaulted on a looming bond payment. "We wait 3 months," Martin said, tapping the calendar. "Then we trigger a hostile bid." "And if they resist?" Roy asked. Martin looked down. "They won't have a choice. Their debt coverage ratio's too low. The bank won't back them. They'll fold." One afternoon, Gregory Mason passed Martin in the corridor. Martin was cleaning fingerprints off the glass doors of the executive lounge. "Still here, huh?" Gregory said. "Tell me, ever think about doing something more ambitious?" Martin gave a faint smile. "I'm already working on something." Gregory chuckled and kept walking. The elevator doors closed behind him. Martin stood still, fingers tightening around the cloth. One day Gregory would find out what that something really was. The next day, Martin heard something new in the hallway: desperation. CFO Paul Lansing was arguing with the controller, his voice sharp. "What do you mean the bridge loan fell through?" Martin knelt outside the doorway, cleaning a vent as if nothing was happening. "We have 8 weeks. If that bond comes due, we're screwed," Paul cursed under his breath. "Fine. We'll schedule a restructuring meeting, but I swear if someone leaks this..." He stopped, looked down, saw Martin wiping the floor. "Get out of here, man. Don't you have toilets to clean?" Martin stood slowly, met his gaze, then quietly walked away. But inside, something had shifted. They were unraveling. 2 days later, Gina reported that her contact in accounting had been asked to cook expense reports. They're trying to show short-term profitability, she said. Window dressing before investor review. Then let's accelerate, Martin said. He made 3 calls that night. One to a financial lawyer in Delaware, one to a private lender with a grudge against Echelon, and one to a man who once ran HR fired without cause, who now had contacts at a prominent business magazine. The next week, rumors started spreading. Anonymous sources suggest major restructuring at Echelon Corp. Layoff wave likely. Key investors distancing themselves. At the same time, Lighthouse Holdings began reaching out to small stakeholders, offering to buy their shares. They didn't say who they were. They didn't need to. The fear alone made people sell. Martin was methodical, calculated, quiet. Each new vote bought brought them closer to control. One evening while cleaning the stairwell, Lonnie pulled Martin aside. I need to ask, why this company? Why not rebuild somewhere else? Martin paused, then answered softly, because they laughed when they broke me. He looked out the window, the city glittering below, and because they forgot I was watching. Lonnie nodded slowly. I'm with you, all the way. By late May, the company's internal chaos boiled over. A failed acquisition deal leaked to the press. A senior executive quit abruptly. Gregory Mason was now the acting interim CEO, something he'd dreamed of for years. Martin watched him from a hallway one evening, holding the same mop he'd carried for almost a decade. Gregory's voice echoed down the marble floor. Get legal on the phone, and someone fix this stock slide before the board throws me out. Martin waited until he passed, then whispered under his breath, They won't have to. I'll do it for them. The final straw came the next week. Cleaning staff hours were cut, benefits slashed. Martin called the team. It's time, he said. They all met at Gina's apartment, folders spread out on the kitchen table. He showed them the letter. Intent to acquire majority control. I'm submitting it Friday. Silence hung in the room. Then Roy stood. To hell with it. Let's sweep the whole damn company. On Friday morning, under overcast skies, Martin entered the legal office on 8th Avenue, wearing the same coveralls, carrying a sealed envelope. He handed it to the receptionist. I need this time-stamped and filed. She read the envelope, blinked, then glanced at him. You're with Lighthouse Holdings. Martin smiled. Yes. Would you like to wait in the lobby? No, he said. I've got floors to clean. The letter landed like a thunderclap. By Monday morning, Echelon's boardroom was in a frenzy. Emails flew. Voicemails stacked. Suits rushed down corridors with tense jaws and folders clutched like shields. Gregory Mason read the acquisition intent twice, then a third time, his hand trembling. Who the hell is Lighthouse Holdings? He barked, slamming the paper down. Why hasn't anyone heard of them? Paul Lansing, red-eyed and pale, shook his head. It's a shell group, but they've bought up 29% of our voting rights over the last 6 quarters. All legal, all clean. Gregory's breath hitched. Who's behind it? Paul looked down. We don't know yet. Downstairs, Martin pushed his mop bucket across the marble floor, same as always. Except this time, the rhythm of his movements pulsed with quiet anticipation. Each squeak of the wheels, each sweep of the mop, each whistle of the AC vent. He was counting down. He knew they were panicking now. He could feel it in the walls. Flashback. 10 years earlier, Martin sat in a glass-walled office holding a letter with his name scrubbed from the company he'd built. Across from him sat Gregory, cool as ever. It's just business, Gregory said, shrugging. You held us back. I'm protecting the company. Martin's hands shook. I trusted you. Gregory gave a rehearsed sigh. People change, Marty. Don't take it personal. Martin remembered standing, leaving, and feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. Now, a decade later, the floor was his. Inside the 47th floor boardroom, the emergency meeting began. Gregory tried to project calm. We don't know who they are, but I'm not going to let some ghost operation take my company. Paul cut in. Your company? It's not yours, Greg, and technically, it was never yours to begin with. The words stung more than they should have. Gregory narrowed his eyes. Get me every document on Lighthouse. I want names. I want fingerprints. Then he paused. He looked at the janitor schedule on the clipboard near the door. Wait a second. Who's working tonight? Paul blinked. I don't know, Martin, I think. Gregory frowned. Martin. At 6:15 p.m., Martin entered the elevator. Not in his coveralls. In a charcoal suit, tailored, fitted, sharp lines, and silent shoes. He pressed 47 and waited. The doors opened to a half-lit hallway. He stepped out, walking past confused interns and silent staff. When he entered the boardroom, every conversation stopped. Martin didn't speak. He placed a folder on the center of the table. His voice was calm, precise. Effective immediately, Lighthouse Holdings exercises its controlling interest. We request full operational oversight pending shareholder vote. Gregory stood slowly. His face went pale. You, he whispered. Martin nodded. Yes. Gregory laughed bitterly. You're a janitor. Martin met his eyes. I was, and you were once a friend. He opened the folder. Inside was documentation, bank transfers, stakeholder lists, legal filings. All legitimate. Paul's mouth dropped open. My God, you did this from the inside. Martin looked around. I watched this company lose its soul. I saw good people discarded. I saw leadership rot from arrogance. So I bought the pieces you all ignored. Gregory lunged forward, slamming his hands on the table. This is revenge. You've been waiting to humiliate me. Martin didn't flinch. I'm here to fix what you broke. His tone sharpened. You betrayed your partners. You manipulated investors. You dismantled dignity for quarterly gain. He turned to the others. You can vote to fight me, or you can let this company survive. Silence fell. Then Paul Lansing, eyes still wide, slowly nodded. I move to recognize Lighthouse's petition. Second. A few hands raised, hesitant, then more. It was done. Martin didn't smile. He simply sat. At the head of the table, the janitor's chair now empty behind him. Downstairs, Roy and Gina watched the news on a break room TV. Echelon Corp confirms change in majority control. Lonnie punched the air. Hell yes. Back upstairs, Gregory was frozen in his seat. You won't last, Martin. This isn't your world anymore. Martin turned to him. I never left. I just stopped letting people like you define it. Gregory gathered his briefcase and stormed out. Later that night, Martin stood alone in the boardroom. Only the hum of recessed lights surrounded him. He ran a hand along the polished wood table, then pulled a small rag from his pocket and quietly buffed a fingerprint from its surface. Some habits die hard. A knock on the door. Lonnie stepped in. You ready for tomorrow? Martin nodded. Yeah, let's get to work. She smiled. You know that suit. It looks good on you. He grinned faintly. I'll try not to spill coffee on it. They left the room together. Behind them, the city pulsed with light. But in here, something new had taken root. Not just revenge, redemption. Built floor by floor, one sweep at a time. The following morning dawned clear and cool, the city bathed in pale sunlight. Martin arrived early, not in coveralls, not even in the suit from the night before. He wore a simple button-down shirt, no tie, no pretense. He walked through the glass doors of Echelon as if he had always belonged. The security guard at the desk blinked in recognition, then gave a nod of respect. Mr. Hartley. Martin gave a soft smile. Morning, Henry. That quiet recognition, it meant more than applause. Upstairs, the building hummed with uneasy stillness. Executives huddled in corners. Interns whispered. The cleaning crew stood taller. Roy and Gina waited near the elevator, both dressed in their best. You sure you want to do this? Roy asked. Martin looked around. We've already done it. Today's just the first day we do it in the open. At 9 a.m., sharp Martin chaired his first leadership meeting. The same boardroom, the same fluorescent lights, but the tone completely different. He began with a single gesture. He slid a packet to every person in the room. Inside, restoration of full benefits to all janitorial and maintenance staff. Equity shares for the lowest paid employees. A restructure plan that emphasized sustainability over cosmetic quarterly wins. A pledge of transparency in operations moving forward. The room was silent. Then Paul Lansing leaned back, hands folded. This is unconventional. Martin nodded. So was selling off hundreds of workers to pad a year-end bonus. Paul stared at him, then slowly nodded. All right then, let's see if a new broom really can sweep clean. Oh. While the boardroom adjusted to its new reality, Gregory was nowhere to be found. He had cleared out his office that morning, leaving behind only a photo of the company's founding team. Martin picked it up from the desk, later himself, Gregory and two others smiling with stupid hope. He stared at it for a moment, then turned it face down. As the week progressed, word spread through the company like a slow-burning fire. The janitor, now CEO. At first it sounded like rumor, but when Martin held a town hall meeting on Friday, no one could deny it. He stood on stage in the cafeteria facing a sea of employees, engineers, admin staff, floor techs, even cafeteria cooks. He began with a story. I was 24 when I first walked into this building, not as a janitor but as one of the co-founders. That part of the story was buried, forgotten by design. Murmurs rippled. But I've never believed in forgetting where you came from, so I didn't run. I stayed. I watched. I learned. He took a breath. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back because the people who make this company work, the ones scrubbing the toilets, moving boxes, keeping the lights on, deserve to be seen. There was silence, then applause, then cheering. Lonnie stood near the back arms, folded a smirk, tugging at the edge of her mouth. But not everyone was thrilled. That night, Martin found an anonymous envelope on his new desk. Inside, a photo of him pushing a mop, scrawled across it in marker stick, "To what you know." He stared at it for a long time, then calmly placed it in his desk drawer. He'd expected resistance. People didn't like their illusions shattered. Meanwhile, the subplot thickened. Lonnie had begun investigating the shady bridge loan deal Gregory attempted to finalize just before Martin's takeover. What she found made her blood boil. A side arrangement that would have sold off the company's data assets to a third party overseas. Illegal, hidden, dangerous. She brought it to Martin. This could ruin him, she said. Martin didn't hesitate. Expose it, not for revenge, for everyone they would have harmed. The article hit the press 2 days later. Former Echelon executive under scrutiny for unlawful asset transfers. Gregory's face appeared on business news segments, looking exhausted and cornered. His silence said more than any statement. Meanwhile, Lighthouse Holdings received its first wave of public praise. The man once mopping the floors was now building something better. Roy, who had been silent through most of the chaos, found his own voice again. He approached Martin during a hallway walkthrough. "You know, I used to be ashamed," he said, "of wearing that uniform." Martin turned to him. "We carried more than buckets. We carried what they threw away." Roy nodded. "But not anymore." They smiled, then kept walking. By the end of the quarter, Echelon looked different. Not just on paper, but in spirit. The break room had real coffee again. Janitors were offered training programs if they wanted to move up. The boardroom had more windows open than ever before, literally and figuratively. And for the first time in years, profits were steady, not inflated, not panicked, just real. Martin stood by the lobby one evening, looking up at the company name etched in glass. He saw his reflection beside it, then noticed Henry, the security guard, staring from his desk. Martin smiled and walked over. "You've seen it all, huh?" Henry chuckled. "I saw you mop this whole building for years. Now look at you." Martin leaned in. "You want shares?" Henry blinked. "You're joking." "I'm not. Staff shareholders. You're part of this place, too." Henry stared. Then his smile broke like sunlight. "You're something else, Martin." But Martin just shook his head. "No, I'm just someone who didn't leave the room." 3 months later, the sun rose over the tower like any other morning. But inside, something had changed for good. The cleaning crew arrived not as background staff, but as part owners. Their names now sat beside executives in shareholder reports. Their input was requested in department meetings. And when new hires arrived, orientation included a story most companies would have hidden about a man who swept floors with one hand while studying their balance sheets with the other. Martin stood in the boardroom that afternoon, looking around the space where his journey had both ended and begun. On the wall now hung a framed photo of the entire janitorial staff: Roy, Gina, Laney, and even Martin himself in coveralls smiling. Below the photo, a simple plaque read, "No work is beneath us, no voice above us." The next meeting wasn't with investors, but with staff from every department. Martin opened it casually, no suit, no titles. "We said we'd rebuild from the inside, and we meant it." He looked around the circle. "I don't want a company that survives on silence. I want one that breathes." Lonnie raised her hand. "Then let's talk about adding worker voting rights on major internal decisions." Martin smiled. "Yes, let's." Outside the conference room, Gregory Mason stood in the shadows of the lobby. Disgraced, jobless, bitter. He had returned not for forgiveness, but for closure. He watched Martin speak with an intern in the atrium, calm, thoughtful, attentive. Not gloating, not grandstanding, just present. Gregory's jaw tightened. He turned to leave, then paused. "Martin," he said softly, just loud enough. Martin turned. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Gregory took a step forward. "I was wrong." Martin tilted his head. "Took you long enough." Gregory exhaled. "You built something real here." Martin crossed his arms. "I didn't do it alone. That's the difference." Gregory nodded, and with no further words turned and walked away, carrying his failures into the crowd. That night, Martin visited the basement one last time, the place he'd spent 10 years beneath the radar. The supply closet still smelled like pine cleaner. The cart he used to push now sat empty in the corner. He reached for the old mop handle, ran his hand down its worn wood, then gently leaned it back against the wall. He no longer needed to carry it. Lonnie found him there, just watching the shadows stretch across the concrete. "You're not leaving us, are you?" she asked. Martin smiled. "Not a chance. I just needed to see where the climb began." She stood beside him. "You know she said your story's going to become legend around here." Martin laughed quietly. "Let's hope the next chapter's even better." A week later, they unveiled the new company name, Lighthouse Collective. The press called it bold. Analysts called it naive. But employees, they called it ours. At the first all-staff shareholder meeting, Martin stood at the podium, a soft spotlight overhead. His words were simple. "I don't believe in overnight success. I believe in the long shift, the overlooked hands, the people you pass in the hall and never ask their name." He looked out over the audience, over people in uniforms and suits alike. Those are the ones who keep the lights on, the ones who never left because they believed the room could be better. He paused. "I used to clean this floor on my knees. Now I stand here with you, not above, but with." The applause was quiet at first, then grew, not wild, not chaotic, just steady, strong, grounded, like the people who'd built it. As the lights dimmed and people filed out, Martin stayed behind, watching the janitors, his old friends, stack chairs and sweep corners. He didn't stop them. He joined them, grabbed a chair, moved it gently. "One more shift, for old time's sake." Outside the building glowed with its new name etched in glass. Inside the floors were clean. The staff were seen. And at the top sat a man who never really left the bottom, he just brought everyone else up with him. Sometimes the people we overlook the most are the ones carrying everything. Have you ever worked in a place where no one saw you until you proved them wrong? Martin's story isn't just about revenge. It's about rebuilding from the ground up, quietly, patiently, with purpose. Let this remind us every job matters, every person matters, and sometimes the janitor is the one who saves the whole building. If you've ever been underestimated or if you've helped someone rise, share your story in the comments. I'd love to read it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications if this story moved you. Thanks for staying till the end. See you in the next one.